Hello and welcome to Spill the Tea. True Stories, the place where real life is more fascinating than fiction. Sit back, pour yourself a cup of tea, and let's dive into the moments that stay with us forever. We're starting now. Arthur walked slowly through the park. His gaze fell upon a solitary bench by the fountain, and he decided to sit down, immersing himself in the silence for a while. Peace and astonishing beauty reigned around him. Tall poplars, lined up along the wide avenue, closed their crowns overhead, creating a living dome through which rare sunbeams broke through, flooding the space with a magical light. Those who were rushing about their business and those who were enjoying a leisurely stroll hurried past. Young mothers, alone or in small groups, pushed strollers, their faces radiant with smiles. Small children whirled around on scooters and bicycles, adding liveliness to this idyllic scene of a city park. This landscape awakened warm memories of his own past in Arthur, of the beautiful park in the center of a small town where his childhood was spent. Until fifth grade, his upbringing was mainly handled by his grandmother. They often walked here, fed the birds by the pond, and talked about everything under the sun. Grandmother always spoiled him with a delicious bun from the local bakery or ice cream. Sometimes they met familiar kids from the yard in the park, also walking with their parents. Grandmother and grandfather, though he didn't remember him, invented fun games around the fountain or among the tall trees. It was a bright, serene time, filled with calm and love. Remembering his grandmother, Arthur smiled habitually, but a light sadness shone through the smile. Now he could think of her this way, without experiencing the sharp pain that had struck him immediately after her passing. It happened when he was already a third-year student, old enough, but the loss was unbearable. He wept, not ashamed of his tears, because Grandmother Eleanor was perhaps the closest and dearest person in his life. It was his grandmother, more than anyone else, who truly understood Arthur. He often remembered her, especially during pivotal moments in his life. He wondered how she would have reacted to a certain event and regretted that she couldn't see his successes or share the joy of his victories with him. And there were quite a few victories. Arthur graduated from university with honors and became a qualified young engineer, just as his grandmother had once dreamed. It was she who first noticed that little Arthur wasn't just assembling building blocks, but constructing astonishingly symmetrical and well-thought-out structures, intuitively sensing the correct proportions. Grandmother also discovered his outstanding abilities in mathematics even before he started school. He has a brilliant mind, a future talented engineer. A great future awaits him, Grandmother often said, looking proudly at her grandson. Arthur's mother only smiled. She thought Grandmother was simply blindly adoring him. But his mother was mistaken in her judgment. Grandmother, however, was right about everything except one thing. His great future turned out differently than they had imagined. Arthur indeed turned out to be a talented mathematician, and this became evident in the first grade. While other children struggled with elementary operations, he easily solved problems for fourth graders. His teacher gave him additional, more complex assignments, so he wouldn't get bored in class. Grandmother also tutored him at home. Before retiring, she worked at an architectural firm and was a good mathematician herself, so she proudly believed that Arthur took after her. "Oh, it's a pity Grandpa doesn't see what you've become," she would sigh more than once, looking at Arthur's latest certificate from the City Math Olympiad. Grandfather George died when Arthur was only a few months old. Grandmother missed her husband very much and often told her grandson about him. Grandfather was a surgeon, passionate, attentive, thoughtful. He was loved and respected in the town. Grandfather passed away right at his workplace. Suddenly, his head spun, his vision blurred, and his chest tightened. He was immediately taken to cardiology, diagnosed with a heart attack, but unfortunately, they couldn't save him. Arthur had never seen his grandfather, but that didn't stop him from feeling love for him. Grandmother and, to a lesser extent, his mother, created a vivid and realistic image in his child's mind. Numerous photographs of grandfather, carefully kept by grandmother, completed the picture. So grandfather, invisibly, was still present in Arthur's life. But his father. The boy didn't know his father at all. When Arthur grew a little older, he naturally started asking questions. At that time, he really missed having a male figure around. Grandmother and mother were wonderful, caring, and kind, but he needed someone he could talk to about male topics, kick a ball with, discuss boyish problems. His mother long avoided answering. Grandmother also avoided conversations, invariably redirecting him to his mother. His mother would try to change the subject or claim she was busy. One day, she couldn't bear it anymore and told him, "Yes, he left me when he found out I was pregnant, just ran away, that's all." A common story. He was from out of town, said he was from Arkhangelsk, but who knows if that's true. He was just passing through here. We met at a disco. He told me a pack of lies and then disappeared. After he left, I realized I was expecting you, and I decided I would keep the child no matter what, although I wasn't sure about your father from the very beginning. And how can you be sure about a person you barely know? My parents supported me. Later, Arthur's father reappeared in their small town. He used to come here periodically for work. The guy decided to meet the same girl he had had a wonderful time with on a date a few months earlier, and she came with a noticeably rounded belly. Arthur's father disappeared again. All his mother knew about him was his name and city of residence, and even that information might have been unreliable. The guy could very well have lied. He never looked for him. His mother sighed, and weariness sounded in her voice. Why? He knew where I lived. If he had wanted to, he would have found me himself. But he ran away. He was scared. I don't even blame him. It's just an ugly story. I'm sorry it turned out this way. Arthur was old enough to understand how difficult it was for his mother to remember those times. It turned out she had been too frivolous and then was abandoned in a not very nice way. His mother didn't look her best in this story, which was why she didn't want to tell it. But it was still important for Arthur to know the truth. From then on, the boy stopped dreaming of the long-awaited meeting with his father, stopped imagining him as a hero, a pilot, a deep-sea sailor, a military man, someone who couldn't meet his son because of his important and dangerous job. His mother's confession freed the guy from illusions. Until the age of 10, Arthur lived with his grandmother. Then he moved in with his mother, who rented an apartment near the Math Lyceum. It was more convenient to get to school from his mother's place, so Arthur moved in with his parent. He was old enough, and he no longer needed a babysitter in the form of his grandmother. Still, Arthur went to his grandmother's every weekend. He missed her, his room, his cat Whiskers, and the special atmosphere that reigned in the apartment where his early childhood was spent. At the new Lyceum, Arthur experienced his first love, and it was so intense words couldn't describe it. And yet, it was unrequited. The object of the boy's affection was a girl named Chloe. They were in different classes, but their physical education lessons were at the same time. Arthur didn't excel in sports. He was an excellent student and a gold medalist in all subjects. His report card was full of A's, but in physical education, he had a weak and clearly stretched B. Arthur never liked physical education lessons until his class started having lessons with the 6th B. It was impossible not to notice Chloe. Tall, slender, light, and graceful, she moved like a panther. Arthur admired her every movement, mesmerized as her long, shiny hair, the color of melted chocolate, shimmered in motion. At school, Chloe often wore her hair down, but in physical education, she always tied it up in a high ponytail. Arthur liked this hairstyle because it left the girl's face open, and he could admire her perfect features: a straight nose, dark, arched eyebrows, full, beautifully curved lips, and huge eyes of some unreal turquoise shade. They shone on her dark skin like two lakes on a summer day. Chloe was a real beauty and knew it perfectly well. Others noticed her beauty too. Chloe always had crowds of admirers following her, and she didn't chase them away. She was friendly and welcoming to everyone but didn't let anyone get particularly close, which, strangely enough, pleased Arthur. Arthur wasn't in the crowd of Chloe's obvious admirers. No, he simply wouldn't have had the courage for that. The girls swirling around her were mostly popular guys, handsome, athletic, self-assured, and with an excellent sense of humor. Arthur was never like that. He stayed in the shadows, observing from afar. Grandmother Eleanor was right. Arthur's talent truly blossomed within the walls of the specialized school. Teachers praised him, gave him extra lessons, assigned him more difficult tasks, seeing his potential. In his class, Arthur quickly became the person from whom you could always copy homework. The guy never refused anyone, as he didn't mind sharing his knowledge. For this, he was respected in class, although he wasn't the most popular. News of Arthur's mathematical abilities spread beyond his class, and one day, right during break, she came up to him, Chloe. Instead of a gym uniform, the girl was wearing a black dress with a white collar, perfectly emphasizing her slender figure. Arthur was completely flustered for a moment by her unexpected closeness. "Hi," Chloe smiled radiantly. "My name is Chloe. We have physical education at the same time as your class. Do you remember me?" She was actually asking if he remembered her. If only this beauty knew how much time his thoughts were occupied solely with her. Arthur nodded weakly. Because of the emotions raging inside him, he couldn't utter a word. Chloe came up to him herself. She was talking to him. It was some strange, simply unreal situation, but at the same time, incredibly pleasant. "You see," Chloe continued, hesitating slightly, "the math teacher gave us a test for homework, a very difficult one. I didn't understand anything there, and this is a crucial grade for me. If I get a C, that's it. A C for the quarter. My mother will definitely kill me then. Will you help me out?" Arthur was ready not just to solve the test for Chloe, but to move mountains. Of course, he immediately agreed. Joy lit up the girl's turquoise eyes. "Thank you," she exclaimed, and in a rush of feeling, hugged Arthur. "You really are great. It's not for nothing that the girls from your class say so." After that incident, Chloe and Arthur didn't become close friends. No. But he suddenly started existing for her. She noticed him in the school corridors and greeted him warmly. Sometimes they exchanged glances during their shared physical education class. Less often, she would say something to him, something completely insignificant, but it didn't matter. The main thing was that she noticed him. In ninth grade, Chloe started dating Brandon, the captain of the local football team. That year, a lot of couples formed at school. Probably it was that age, the transitional period. Arthur felt an unpleasant, gnawing feeling seeing them together. It seemed this was how jealousy, which he hadn't known before, manifested itself. He was still in love with Chloe, and was perfectly aware of it. The childish feeling hadn't gone away. On the contrary, it had grown stronger, developed into something new and very powerful. Other girls didn't interest Arthur at all, although some classmates clearly sympathized with the intelligent, pleasant guy. And if he showed even the slightest initiative, they would gladly go on a date with him. But they were of no interest to him. All his thoughts revolved around the unattainable Chloe, around her turquoise eyes and chocolate hair. How happy Arthur was when rumors spread through the Lyceum that Brandon had left Chloe for some older girl. She was said to be a student at a local university, adult, independent, and well-off. Chloe, as if in revenge against her ex, almost immediately started dating a guy who was also older than her. He would pick her up after school in his own car. He was handsome, stylish, looking like a hero from a youth TV series. It seemed he was also a student. Chloe, with eyes shining with happiness, would flutter into the salon of the beautiful car waiting for her at the entrance, and the couple would drive away, leaving behind a trail of envious glances. The girls, as far as Arthur could tell, openly envied Chloe. They said her boyfriend was the son of very wealthy parents. Chloe is so lucky, he's crazy about her. As soon as she turns 18, they'll get married. Our Chloe got a ticket to a happy life. She won't even need to study afterwards. Why? She'll have as much money as she wants anyway. At that time, all the girls dreamed of meeting a prince, a man who would shower them with expensive gifts and fulfill all their desires, just like in the movies. They didn't understand yet. They were young. They didn't think about the fact that free cheese is only in a mousetrap. Arthur felt like a complete nobody compared to Chloe's new admirer. How could he compare to such a prince? That guy had a car, rich parents, and self-confidence. And Arthur? An ordinary guy, smart, but without outward polish or connections. And then there was graduation, entering university, and life somehow spun, twirled in a frantic rhythm. The girl briefly surfaced in his thoughts at the first reunion of former classmates, which took place at the Lyceum 2 years after graduation. Arthur learned that the girl's predictions had come true. Indeed, Chloe married her suitor as soon as she turned 18. And she didn't go to study anywhere. Apparently, her new father-in-law got her a job as a secretary in his company. Chloe earned fabulous money, drove her own car, lived with her husband in a luxurious apartment in the city center, and often flew abroad for vacations. In short, she made the collective dream of the local girls about a beautiful life come true. How lucky, former classmates repeated in various ways, listening to Chloe's story from those in the know. She herself didn't come to the reunion because she was on vacation with her husband in the Maldives. One of her friends even showed others photos of the beautiful and happy couple on the beach. The pictures looked like shots from a Hollywood movie, perfect and unattainable. Arthur returned home in a sad mood after that evening. He had gone to the event only for Chloe, wanting to see her turquoise eyes, maybe even exchange a few words with her. Over the years, Arthur had grown up, become more self-confident, and achieved his first successes. Perhaps he would have even dared to talk to her about his feelings. It seemed to him that the relationship with the adult rich kid was already in the past. He somehow hoped that Chloe was free and open to communication. But no. Now she was a married lady. Her life had become completely different, far from his reality. Perhaps this was exactly the life she had dreamed of. People envied her, and Arthur understood that he, of course, couldn't have given her all of that. How could he compete with such a world? And then life somehow spun again. Studies, exams, Olympiads, projects. Arthur, as a promising young specialist, was hired part-time by a large oil company, Spectrum, while still a student. It was practically impossible to get in from the street, although many aspired to, as salaries there were 3 to 4 times the average in the region. At first, Arthur even felt dizzy when he received a transfer. True, he also had to work hard. Combining study and work was not easy. But Arthur managed, and he managed very well. His grandmother and mother predicted a great future for him, proud of their son and grandson. Later, only his mother was proud, because his grandmother suddenly passed away. Arthur fell into a deep apathy, from which he was again helped by his beloved and very interesting job, and also the thought that his grandmother would have been hurt to see him in such a state. She always wanted her grandson to live a full life, enjoy every day, socialize a lot, develop, and move forward. Arthur thought he had forgotten Chloe. No. Memories of first childhood love stay with a person forever, like a light trail. But the torments and worries about that union being impossible were gone. Arthur even started dating a girl, and the relationship quickly became very serious. Sarah studied at the same university, just a year younger. They met somehow at a student conference. She was sweet, kind, open, intelligent, interested in modern architecture. Arthur knew Sarah was truly in love with him. It was in her eyes, felt in her every touch. It's an astonishingly pleasant feeling to know that someone loves you so sincerely, accepts you, and admires you. True, Arthur himself didn't feel the kind of feelings for the girl that make your head spin and your pulse quicken. Nothing like what he had experienced in school towards Chloe. But he understood and appreciated Sarah very much. Her attention touched him, and her admiration for him was captivating. He wanted to take care of Sarah. He liked to make her happy, to bring a smile to her sweet face. The young people agreed on the most important issues. They often understood each other without words and even finished each other's sentences. It was complete idyll, a calm harbor. This seemed more than enough for Arthur's happiness. And what was in school, the feeling for Chloe. Well, that was all teenage passion, first infatuation, nothing more. Adults perceive the world differently, and that's normal. The main thing was, he felt good and calm with Sarah. The young people were not in a hurry to get married. It was their mutual decision. They were happy together as they were, enjoying each other's company. First, they both wanted to establish their careers, get firmly on their feet, and achieve financial independence. Neither Sarah nor Arthur, nor their mutual acquaintances, doubted that they would marry sooner or later. It was a decided matter, just a question of time. Arthur finished university first. Of course, he was hired by that same oil company full-time. His salary increased several times accordingly, opening up new opportunities. The volume and complexity of tasks also increased, requiring full dedication. Sarah received her diploma next. The promising graduate was gladly hired on the recommendation of the rector by the architectural firm she had dreamed of. The girl's eyes glowed with delight when she told Arthur about her new job, and the guy understood her, felt the same anticipation and joy from professional growth himself. Sarah even moved in with Arthur. By that time, he could already afford to buy an apartment, his own, separate one, and had even managed to renovate it, creating a cozy nest. They lived like a typical young family, making joint plans. And of course, they planned a wedding, because, well, they had been together for so long, and everything planned was coming true quickly. So why delay, right? They both decided to postpone having children for now, but they would formalize their relationship. Sarah dreamed of a summer wedding, wanted a light white dress, a photo shoot in nature, a celebration on the bank of the local wide river. Arthur supported his fiancée. He liked every suggestion she made, every detail she came up with. Or maybe Arthur just didn't care? The wedding details interested him little, to be honest. All his thoughts were occupied by another major project at work. It happened in February. Sarah had gone to visit her mother and father in a neighboring town for a while. She had been meaning to visit them for a long time, and suddenly she had accumulated several days off. So, she went. That day, Arthur and his colleagues managed to get a large sum from the company's economists for an important project after long and tense negotiations. Someone suggested celebrating this event. Arthur gladly agreed. The negotiations had been tense, nerve-wracking. He wanted to relax a bit after all that stress. They decided to go to a bar located in the city center. Mike, one of Arthur's colleagues and closest associates, assured them that it had the best live music, the tastiest beer, and the most beautiful girls. A bar it was, no one objected. Almost all the tables were occupied, as were the seats at the bar counter. But for Mike, as a regular patron of the establishment, the administrator still found a small sofa in the corner. So the company settled in comfortably. Conversations, jokes, and laughter began. They made plans for the funds they had obtained with such difficulty, dreaming that their new idea would bring the company a lot of money, and them, fame and bonuses. And then Arthur couldn't believe his eyes at first. Suddenly, he saw her. Chloe. His head spun, his pulse quickened, cold sweat broke out on his back. Everything was like in his youth, like in those school years. She still had a huge influence on him, an adult and accomplished man. His feelings, it turned out, hadn't gone anywhere, hadn't changed. They had only been dormant. But Chloe? Yes, Chloe had changed a lot. But she still attracted Arthur like a magnet, incredibly. When Arthur noticed Chloe, she was standing at the counter talking to a waitress. The girls were smiling at each other. It was clear they had a good, friendly relationship. Chloe? It was her smile. Her long, milk chocolate-colored hair fell freely over her shoulders. Her turquoise eyes on her dark, beautiful face still shone. But now there was something elusive in them. Perhaps a hidden sadness, or perhaps anxiety. Arthur hadn't noticed this in his school years. Then her eyes shone with carefree happiness. Chloe was wearing an emerald-colored dress that revealed her slender legs up to the knee and massive winter sneakers. It was an unusual, semi-sporty yet elegant look that suited her very well. "Arthur, here!" Mike was looking at Arthur questioningly. He had apparently been telling him something important, and now wanted his opinion. And Arthur. He was only looking at Chloe and didn't notice anyone or anything around him, absorbed in his suddenly rekindled feelings. "Ah, saw someone you know? A beauty," Mike assessed, following Arthur's gaze, and immediately returned to his inspired speech, losing all interest in the girl. For him, she was just a fleeting, pleasant sight. Then Chloe moved further with the waitress, to a corner of the hall invisible from where Arthur was sitting. He didn't want to lose sight of her, so he got up and hurried after the girls. Arthur managed to see Chloe slip into a back room. He decided to wait by the door. Perhaps Chloe went there to chat with her waitress friend, to exchange news. Of course, sooner or later she would come out, and then their meeting would be inevitable. But what to say to Chloe? How to start a conversation after so many years? Arthur had absolutely no idea. He was nervous, worried, running through casual, non-committal phrases in his head, trying to find the perfect way to talk to her. Chloe fluttered out of the back room. The guy didn't expect to see this. Chloe was wearing the uniform of the bar's waitresses, a black t-shirt, tight black jeans, a gray apron, and a badge with the name Victoria on her chest. Chloe, a waitress? How was this possible? She had married a very rich man and, in theory, should now be living a social, bohemian life, dazzling at receptions, not rushing around with trays, serving beer. The girl was about to walk past Arthur, but he called out to her, unable to restrain himself. "Chloe, is that you?" She stopped, looked him up and down carefully, and a slight embarrassment appeared on her face. Recognition flickered in her eyes. Arthur saw it clearly, and suddenly Chloe became truly embarrassed. She smiled awkwardly and replied, "Well, yes, it's me. And you? Arthur? Yes, yes. Wow, how you've changed, how interesting." A charming smile played on her lips again. Now she was no longer shy. "In school, you were like a typical nerd, tall, thin, unremarkable. Years often do you men good, transforming you." Arthur blossomed at this compliment. Chloe had just clearly expressed her liking. It was incredible. Immediately his self-confidence increased, and his strength and the world around him burst into new colors. "And are you working here?" Arthur clarified, although the answer was obvious. "As you can see," Chloe sighed, and the smile left her face, replaced by a shadow of sadness. "Life is a strange thing, unpredictable. Who would have thought that everything would turn out this way for me?" "Did something happen?" Arthur asked, sensing some drama behind her words. "Something happened, yes. It's an ugly story, very. But everything happens for a reason. I always say that. I try to believe it. How about you? How are you doing? What are you doing now?" "I work at Spectrum, the oil company," Arthur replied, feeling proud of his achievements. "Ah, right. I heard about it from someone," Chloe nodded. "Well, good for you. You were always smart and determined. I noticed that even in school." Chloe was standing very close, saying pleasant things about him and looking. How she was looking at him. There was a lot in that look. Interest, admiration, warmth, tenderness, something he had waited for so long. "And we're here with colleagues celebrating a corporate event," Arthur explained for some reason, gesturing towards his table. feeling a little awkward. Well, great. Have fun, Chloe smiled. Are you planning to stay here much longer? Arthur shrugged. There'll be fewer people towards the end of my shift. We'll talk, okay? I really want to know how you are. It's so nice to meet someone from childhood, Chloe said thoughtfully. It was the best time, carefree. Throughout the evening, Chloe was very busy, scurrying with trays from table to table, smiling at tipsy men, joking back at their sometimes vulgar, sometimes simply stupid jokes, maintaining professional dignity. They often met each other's eyes, Chloe and Arthur, and the guy's heart would be flooded with tenderness. Such a silent dialogue with the girl who, as it turned out, still meant a lot to him, even after years. Once, Chloe hadn't noticed him at all, and now she herself suggested chatting after her shift. Arthur's colleagues were getting ready to go home. They had called taxis. He went out to see them off to the car. "Aren't you leaving?" Mike asked, his tongue noticeably thick from the amount of alcohol consumed. "No, I'll stay here a bit longer," Arthur replied, feeling drawn to stay. "Got it," Mike smiled conspiratorially, glancing towards the hall. "Yeah, the acquaintance, the beauty with the tray. Just don't forget you have Sarah, your fiancée." Arthur thought about his words. Sarah, kind, smart, loyal, reliable, his future wife. She would surely be upset to know that the man she was marrying in the summer decided to stay at the bar, and not just for any reason, but to chat with his first love. On the other hand, he wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just curious to know how it happened that Chloe suddenly became a waitress when he was sure she was living in luxury. Closer to closing time, there were very few people left in the bar. Chloe finally managed to sit down at a table with Arthur. Her shift was ending. She looked a little tired, but for some reason, even more attractive, more real. "Oh, it was a tough shift," she smiled at Arthur, rubbing her tired feet. "Can I get you something? My treat." "No, thank you," Arthur replied. "Then I'd have to bring it myself, and I'd rather sit here. My feet are throbbing. Waitresses rarely wear heels in a bar, but those are our rules." "That uniform suits you, even with heels," Arthur said, genuinely believing it. "Thanks, but a waitress uniform is not what I'd like to wear for life, of course," Chloe sighed. "Then why are you here?" Arthur repeated his main question. "Well, fate has a funny way of working out, you see," she replied, and bitterness sounded in her voice. "You know I married Daniel right after school, the guy I dated in high school?" Arthur nodded. Yes, mutual acquaintances had told him about it. It was the main news of that time. Well, that's it. At first, everything was like a fairy tale, just like in those movies the girls dreamed about. I couldn't even believe you could live like that. A huge apartment, a room that looked like a picture from an interior design magazine. Perfect and lifeless. A loving, handsome, caring husband who drove me everywhere in an expensive foreign car. Constantly gave me gifts. A card regularly topped up with substantial sums just like that. I didn't even have to ask. Travel any time of year, work. Daniel's father hired me as a secretary for the senior manager in his company. My entire job was to record calls from people trying to reach the boss in his absence, answer emails. Well, maybe make coffee for the boss a couple of times a day. That's it. I sat in a beautiful office, read novels, played games on my phone, painted my nails, chatted with colleagues about trifles. I changed outfits constantly, getting ready for work every morning like it was a holiday. Well, it was beautiful, and I earned a more than decent salary, one that people work around the clock for. "What about studying? Didn't you enroll anywhere then?" Arthur asked. "Studying." I didn't think about it then. It seemed completely unnecessary. I started a completely different life. Beautiful, bright, full of events, shopping, trips. It seemed like it would always be like this, that it was forever. Time passed. Daniel, who had always been attentive and considerate, changed. He started staying late at work, citing business. Then endless business trips began, from which my husband somehow returned with a bronze tan, as if he had been vacationing at southern resorts. Engrossed in new acquaintances, work, and shopping trips, I didn't notice it right away. I was too busy with myself. And when I realized something was wrong, I got scared. Only then did it dawn on me. My happiness was fragile and illusory. It completely depended on Daniel and his attitude towards me, his decisions and plans for life. And Daniel. His love had seemed so reliable, so strong, practically eternal. But he kept drifting away, becoming a stranger. I tried to fix the situation. I bought luxurious lingerie, prepared culinary delights, came up with unusual gifts for my husband, tried to be the perfect wife. I even brought up the topic of a child, although initially, we both planned not to rush into having heirs. Daniel perceived all my efforts and attempts to restore our former relationship with complete indifference, as if it didn't concern him. Only the conversation about a child angered him a little. "We're not ready yet," Daniel cut in coldly. "It's too early to think about children. We haven't had enough fun ourselves. We need to live for ourselves." And one day, I got into my husband's phone. My husband was in the bathroom at the time. Usually he took his phone everywhere with him, never parted with it. But that time, he left the gadget on the table in the bedroom, which I took advantage of. I stumbled upon my husband's correspondence with some Tiffany. She was Daniel's mistress, there was no doubt about it, the messages were too explicit. The messages exchanged between Daniel and Tiffany turned out to be quite eloquent, full of tenderness and passion. In addition, the text messages were interspersed with photos of Tiffany in revealing outfits. There were even videos. I expected my husband to at least start making excuses, apologizing, but he just shrugged, as if to say, "What's the big deal?" In his worldview, having a mistress was a matter of everyday life, the norm. After all, Daniel's father behaved exactly the same way, as did most of his friends. Men earn money and do what they want. Women endure everything and serve their masters. Everyone has their role, their destiny. And I was even ready to put up with it for the sake of a beautiful life, for the sake of maintaining my usual comfort. But oh, if it hadn't been for Tiffany. I felt threatened by Tiffany. She was younger, bolder, she could take my place. I tried to talk to my husband carefully, without offending Daniel, but also letting him know that his behavior was unacceptable to me. The tactic didn't work. He ignored my hints. One day, a scandal erupted. A real one. Daniel called things by their names, spoke directly and rudely. He reminded me where he had taken me from and what I had gained from our union, explained that everything had a price, and my price was his infidelity. I felt like a nobody, humiliated. No, I wasn't afraid of losing Daniel as a person. After what came out, he even became repulsive to me, a puffed-up peacock. I was only afraid of losing my new life, which I had already gotten used to, which I had dreamed of being a part of. "And so I resigned myself," Chloe sighed, looking thoughtfully at Arthur, and the pain of the past was reflected in her eyes. "I was sometimes disgusted with myself, looking in the mirror. But I lived with Daniel, pretended to be an exemplary wife, and to have unearthly love when it was necessary to maintain appearances. That's how I existed." Chloe endured Daniel's endless infidelities, his condescending attitude towards her, his rudeness. In return, she received unlimited money, the opportunity to live without worries. And instead of saving up for her own business, or at least a separate apartment, creating a safety net for herself. No. Chloe spent everything on entertainment. Beautiful clothes, going to expensive clubs with friends, trips to the sea, luxurious perfume, and similar joys that helped her distract herself, feel happy, at least for a while. True, more and more often Chloe felt longing in her soul and some chilling emptiness somewhere in her chest, which no purchases could fill. Drinking helped her forget somewhat, but unfortunately, only for a short time. just dulling the pain. And then one day, Daniel announced to his wife that they were getting a divorce. Casually, as if it were about some trifle, about buying bread. Chloe felt as if she had been punched in the gut. She even gasped from surprise and fear. She understood, she knew, that she would now have to return to her parents' apartment, to that very Khrushchev-era building. All jointly acquired property was registered in Daniel's father's name, as he had said, which meant that after the divorce, she would get nothing, would be left with nothing. Back to the shabby Khrushchev building, the perpetually drunk father, the mother who counted every little thing and tried to control everything. No profession in hand, no savings, no prospects. A banal story. Tearfully banal. It was her own fault. Chloe sighed sadly again, and self-condemnation sounded in her voice. I'm sorry I confided in you like this. It just burst out. I was tired of keeping everything inside. I didn't tell anyone. And you were always good, understanding, too wise for your age. It's nice to talk to you like this, to pour everything out. The story indeed turned out to be comically banal, like something from a cheap novel. Daniel met a young beauty somewhere in a club, and a passionate romance ensued. The girl, not being a fool, got pregnant and caught Daniel while he was still hot, while he was blinded by passion. He, before his passion for the young nymphette subsided, decided to get rid of his old wife, who no longer brought him pleasure. That's how Chloe returned home, to her parents' nest. She couldn't live with her parents. The atmosphere was unbearable. She sold some of her branded clothes, pawned the jewelry Arthur had given her. This was enough to rent an apartment for 6 months, to find temporary shelter. And then she went looking for a job. After all, she was, of course, immediately fired from her father-in-law's firm. She was just decoration there. Without any diploma, her education wasn't much. She couldn't be choosy. She managed to get a job as a waitress in a bar somehow. I actually like it here, Chloe finally smiled, and a spark appeared in her eyes. The music is good, the people are fun, the atmosphere is lively. It's even cool in its own way. I'm so sorry you had to go through that, Arthur said with sincere sympathy, looking at Chloe. It's hard, very. Daniel played with a beautiful toy, found a new one, and just got rid of the old one without regret. He acted terribly. It's nothing. At least we didn't manage to have children with that Daniel, Chloe chuckled, and bitterness sounded in her voice. He always treated me condescendingly, as if from above, like an object. And I, a foolish and young girl then, thought it was his care, his patronage, his love. Nothing of the sort, just possessiveness. His new wife is unlikely to be happy with him, unless she understands the rules of the game. So I'm even glad I got rid of him. Indeed, it was the right decision. Chloe looked into Arthur's eyes, and something new was in her gaze, something that made his heart beat faster. Tell me about yourself. Do you have anyone now? No. Arthur lied for some reason, although Sarah's image immediately popped into his head. I don't have anyone. I'm free. But he couldn't tell her about Sarah, looking at Chloe. And anyway, Sarah seemed distant and completely foreign now, as if she didn't exist. They sat at the table by the wall for a long time that evening, remembering the past, mutual acquaintances, school years. Arthur easily and naturally confessed to Chloe how deeply he had been in love with her for several years, how she had occupied all his thoughts. I wish I had known that then, Chloe said with regret. That's exactly what I was looking for. Sincere feelings, true love. But the guys who hung around me, you understand, they only wanted one thing. They didn't see me as a person. I thought that's how it always was, that all men were like that. Then they walked through the night city, forgetting about time. They didn't want to part at all. It seemed the world had shrunk to just the two of them. Arthur put his arm around Chloe's shoulders, and she trustingly leaned against him, feeling protected. She invited him to her place. Chloe rented a small apartment near the bar. Arthur agreed without hesitation. And so they spent the night together, their first night, filled with tenderness and long-awaited closeness. In the morning, Arthur felt truly happy, as never before. After all, she was there, Chloe, his first, and, as it turned out, last love. An unprecedented surge of energy, a pleasant lightness in his soul, a feeling of fullness of life. This mood wasn't even clouded by thoughts of Sarah. He would talk to her, definitely talk to her, explain everything as it was. Sarah was smart, she would understand, he was sure of it. Dreams just had to come true, absolutely. Otherwise, life loses all meaning, becomes empty. They started dating, Chloe and Arthur. Their relationship developed rapidly. He did tell her about Sarah. He didn't want to start a new life with a lie. The man didn't hide anything from his beloved. He wanted to be sincere and honest with her in everything. Chloe was clearly upset, became tense, distrust flickered in her eyes, a shadow of past experience. "This has happened to me before," she said in a low tone. "There was a man in my life who promised he would divorce for me. He didn't divorce, he just lied." "This is a completely different situation, Chloe," Arthur tried to convince her. "And Sarah and I aren't even married. We don't have the kind of obligations he had." The conversation with Sarah was long and difficult, one of the hardest in Arthur's life. He sweated as if he had unloaded 3 wagons of coal, feeling terrible. Always calm and rational, Sarah was in hysterics, sobbing, begging Arthur to come to his senses, even cursing him and the hated Chloe, whom she blamed for everything. Arthur's heart ached with pain as he looked at his now ex-fiancée, at her suffering. It seemed Sarah really loved him truly. Later, Arthur would learn from mutual acquaintances that life without her beloved was so unbearable for Sarah that she tried to end her life. Fortunately, she was quickly found and revived, receiving timely help. Sarah spent some time in the hospital. Psychiatrists worked with her, helping her cope with the trauma. Because of this impulsive act, the girl lost the prestigious job she loved so much. Arthur felt guilty for what was happening to her. He was tormented by the realization of the consequences of his choice. But how could he help her now? No one is obliged to sacrifice their happiness and dreams for another person. No one is obliged to live a life that isn't their own. Chloe comforted her beloved, hugging him. She moved in with him immediately after Arthur broke up with Sarah. Neither of them wanted to be apart for a minute. Both wanted to be constantly by each other's side. Arthur offered Sarah help and support through mutual friends, but she proudly refused. She didn't want to hear about her ex-fiancé anymore. She perceived his action as meanness and betrayal, despite the fact that he hadn't lied to her, had told her everything honestly right away. Anyway, in the end, everything worked out wonderfully for Sarah. She recovered, found a new job, married a good man, and gave birth to 2 wonderful boys close in age. Arthur was sincerely happy for Sarah, seeing that she had found her happiness. He even tried to call her at some point to talk, to apologize, but then he realized it was all improper. The past should remain in the past. Years had passed since their breakup, and all those bright and joyful events that had happened in her life. Well, all right. No means no. It was meant to be. Arthur and Chloe also got married. Their dream came true. The initial passion subsided a bit. Everything settled down somehow, fell into a usual routine. Arthur was happy. The woman he had loved since childhood was by his side, and he thought that things would only get better, that they would have a long and happy life together. Chloe quit her job at the bar. Arthur supported his wife's decision. He didn't feel he had the right to advise her on such a matter, but since she wanted to, well, Arthur only supported her. He could fully provide for their small family. He didn't like his wife working nights at the bar, smiling at tipsy men. He was probably jealous. And the house immediately became somehow cozier. Now, when Arthur returned from work, the rooms were always tidy and smelled of delicious food. Domestic comfort awaited him. Chloe was wonderful, beautiful, graceful, stunning, the best woman in the world for him. Arthur forgave her little weaknesses, whims, demanding nature, groundless complaints that sometimes arose. It even seemed cute in his eyes, like character traits. And anyway, beauties are allowed a little more than others. It was an axiom he had learned. And then, the unforeseen happened. The Spectrum Company, where Arthur had successfully worked all these years, went bankrupt. Competitors saw to it. It was a long and dark history of corporate wars. Spectrum was bought out by Moscow businessmen. Assets were divided. It was ruined. People were laid off. Arthur was suddenly without a job, without his usual high income. No, he was quickly invited to a factory. A specialist of Arthur's level was known in the city. He had a reputation. But the salary he was offered was 5 times less than what he had at Spectrum. And even then, they met Arthur halfway. His salary was much higher than the average in the city. In short, they had to significantly cut back on expenses, rethink their usual lifestyle. Chloe was used to spending large sums on herself, living lavishly. She went to expensive fitness clubs and spas, loved shopping, and was a regular at the local cosmetology salon. Chloe dressed beautifully, sat with friends in restaurants, took short trips to the sea several times a year. And then all this suddenly stopped, became inaccessible. Arthur himself was worried about losing his job and reduced income. But Chloe, for her, the decline in quality of life was a real tragedy, the collapse of her accustomed world. Especially since it wasn't about temporary difficulties. Arthur simply had no prospects in this city to return to his previous income level. Chloe tried to encourage her husband to start his own business, seeing his intelligence and talent. "What are you thinking? That requires a different character, an entrepreneurial streak. I'm not like that. I'm an executor," he honestly replied, understanding his strengths and weaknesses. He truly didn't see himself at the head of a business. He didn't have the right mentality, the right drive, the right mindset. But as an executor, a brilliant engineer, he was excellent. "Yeah, that requires backbone, like Daniel had." Chloe shook her head in disappointment, and these words hurt Arthur deeply. It hurt him that he was being compared to Daniel, and not in his favor, that his ex-husband was being held up as an example. But he still never once reminded his beloved how and why her relationship with her ex-husband ended. He didn't reproach her. Now Chloe didn't cook, didn't clean, fundamentally didn't do housework, although she wasn't working and had the time for it. "I didn't sign up to be a free servant. I didn't marry for this," she would declare to her husband in the evenings when he returned from work. Arthur would sigh and go to the kitchen himself to boil them pasta with sausages for dinner or fry eggs. He forgave Chloe these unfair reproaches, her dissatisfaction. The main thing now was to preserve their wonderful relationship, not to say or do anything unnecessary that could destroy it. And then Chloe told Arthur she was expecting a child. The man was happy, despite the difficulties. This was exactly what, in his opinion, could bring them closer, strengthen the family. A baby would appear in their family. It would change everything for the better. However, the future mother herself was clearly not thrilled about this news. She even considered terminating the pregnancy. Arthur talked her out of it. He wanted this child. The pregnancy was difficult. Chloe felt physically and morally unwell. Her back and stomach ached, her mood constantly changed, she was irritable. She blamed Arthur for all her misfortunes and ailments. After all, it was he who couldn't provide for his wife and future child at the level she was accustomed to, and that's why Chloe suffered so much. The man felt guilty, but try as he might, he couldn't earn more. His salary, by the standards of their city, was already quite good, above average. Only Chloe needed more, much more. Arthur thought that after the child was born, Chloe would change, become softer, more caring. After all, pregnant women often have hormonal fluctuations, and then everything returns to normal. Maternal instinct takes over. But no. Sophia was born, and Chloe immediately fell into some prolonged apathy, became distant. Her daughter didn't bring her joy or inspiration at all, didn't evoke tenderness. Sometimes from the outside, it seemed that the only feeling the new mother felt towards the newborn was irritation. When Arthur came home from work, he often found a terrible scene. His little daughter crying in the playpen, while in the next room, Chloe was messaging someone on social media with headphones on, completely immersed in her virtual world. The man tried to talk to his wife about raising their daughter, very carefully and gently, trying not to offend or hurt his other half. A child at this age needs attention, warmth, care, affection. "Are you suggesting I spoil her?" Chloe would flare up in response, her voice becoming sharp. "Pick her up at every whimper, coo over her nonstop, forgetting about myself and my needs?" "No, of course, but—" At this point, Chloe would interrupt him every time, not letting him finish, and accusations would rain down on Arthur, making him feel worthless. Chloe would scream that she needed rest, that she was tired. She had brought a new person into the world, suffered for 9 months of pregnancy, then labor, then the forced necessity of being with the baby 24 hours a day without help, without the right to break free even for a day. "You can't send me to the sea for a week, we don't have money for that. You can't hire a nanny so I can finally do what I'm really interested in, live my own life. You have no right to tell me anything at all, so just be quiet and don't interfere." There was so much hatred, so much contempt in Chloe's voice and gaze that Arthur was always lost and didn't know what to say, how to comfort his beloved, how to reach her. He felt like a complete nobody, a pathetic failure. It hurt to realize that the person who was his own and whom he loved saw him that way, that she was disappointed in him, especially since Arthur knew how sweet and friendly his wife could be when everything was good. When he worked at Spectrum and there was money in the house, everything was perfect. She was affectionate and content. So, the head of the family was to blame for what was happening between them, between the spouses. He couldn't provide for his wife and daughter properly. That's why everything was falling apart, he thought, taking all the blame upon himself. Coming home from work, Arthur readily took on household chores, cooking, cleaning, playing with his daughter, trying to compensate for the lack of maternal warmth. He even liked it, seeing Sophia's smile. In his arms, Sophia missed her dad during the day, clung to him. Order gradually reigned in the house. It became cozier. It was nice when the house was clean and calm. Arthur even hired a nanny in the end, since his beloved found it so difficult to cope alone. But Chloe was still dissatisfied even then. It was hard to please her. She didn't get along with the first woman. The nanny had the audacity to point out Chloe's shortcomings in handling her own child, so they had to part ways. The next nanny was less talkative and more compliant. Chloe would go shopping or relax at spas, trying to regain her former sparkle. Of course, she couldn't live life to the fullest as before. The budget was limited. But Arthur tried to make sure his wife always had money on her card for her entertainment, for her little joys. He understood. Women on maternity leave need to relax at least sometimes. Everyone around them kept saying it, writing about it in magazines. But what Chloe was doing, of course, could hardly be called just relaxation. It was an escape. Chloe lived some separate life of her own, further and further away from the family. She only came home to sleep. Sometimes she would show up drunk in the early morning, cheerful, with sparkling eyes. Arthur, meanwhile, worried about Chloe, stayed up at night, waiting for her. He still loved her, and hoped that his wife's behavior was a temporary postpartum state, a hormonal imbalance. Although Sophia was almost a year old by then, who knows? The man saw how other women, other mothers behaved. He himself often walked with Sophia, took her to clinics, and of course noticed everything around him. And the way women looked at their babies, and how carefully they handled them, and how they endlessly cooed with their children, sang them lullabies. Sophia didn't see or know any of this from her mother. Her mother was absolutely cold and indifferent to her, as if she didn't concern her. Chloe touched her daughter only out of necessity. She didn't approach her unnecessarily, didn't pick her up without need. Arthur even finally tried to start a business, hoping that financial success would bring Chloe back to the family. He thought that when there was money in the family, everything would get better. Chloe would become her old self, loving and caring. True, as expected, nothing came of it. Arthur only lost his savings, investing them in a hopeless venture. He was already thinking about inviting Chloe to see a family psychologist. He felt he couldn't cope alone, that their relationship was falling apart. He felt, you can't hide something obvious, problems need to be solved. He even found an excellent specialist recommended by acquaintances. But before the man managed to talk to his wife about the upcoming visit, something happened that changed everything greatly, turning his life upside down. One day, Arthur stayed late at work, returned later than usual. Chloe was still not home, although it was late. The nanny was with Sophia, a saintly woman who meekly endured the irregular working hours and didn't comment on even Chloe's most unacceptable antics. This was not surprising. Chloe often returned late, or rather, early in the morning. It was Friday. She had probably gone to a club with friends again, Arthur thought. Chloe had long ceased to consider it necessary to inform her husband about this. Arthur let the nanny go, thanking her, and quickly made himself dinner. Sophia was already fast asleep in her crib, covered with a blanket. Poor child, deprived of her mother's love, Arthur thought. And the perpetually busy father couldn't give the girl enough attention, torn between work and home. The man was constantly worried about this, feeling guilty. His child lacked the warmth of significant loved ones, the most important thing. Arthur entered the bedroom they shared with Chloe, looked around. His heart sank with a premonition of trouble. Something was wrong. The air felt thin. Finally, he understood. Chloe's things. There were significantly fewer of them than usual. The man rushed to the closet, threw open the doors of his wife's dressing table. A lot was missing. Both the jewelry box Arthur had given Chloe when their finances were still good, and his wife's favorite branded dresses, and many other small personal items. Chloe didn't take everything with her. She only took her most loved and valuable things. This list clearly didn't include her husband. A little later, in the kitchen cupboard, Arthur found a note that explained everything, dotting the I's. It turned out Chloe had met a businessman from Germany named Hans on social media. What started as a casual correspondence quickly turned into something much more serious, grew into a virtual romance. Hans admired Chloe's appearance, her sensuality, sincerity, tenderness, everything she knew how to present in a favorable light. Arthur sighed heavily, imagining her performance. He wondered what Hans would think of his chosen one if he suddenly lost his fortune and she had to work. This man had even come to Chloe's town several times, and they met, spent time together, fell more and more in love with each other, made plans for the future, for a life together. In short, Chloe left for him, for her German prince. She filed for divorce, wrote a waiver of her daughter, even had the document officially notarized. It lay right there, under that explanatory note, cold, written proof of what Arthur had long known. Sophia was not needed by Chloe. She was a burden to her. For some reason, Chloe couldn't find the strength to tell her husband everything to his face. She acted in this cowardly way. Arthur felt the ground disappear from under his feet. His world was collapsing. He still loved Chloe, even this way. Distant, cold, capricious, selfish. And until the last moment, he hoped that his wife would come to her senses, reconsider, become her old self, the one he had fallen in love with, and they would still be happy together. Arthur had almost no doubt about this. He believed in the best. But Chloe left, definitively. She left him, abandoned Sophia, her own daughter. She fled to a new life, bright, prosperous, undoubtedly interesting and pleasant for her, without problems or worries. In the note, Chloe asked him not to seek meetings with her, not even contact, to sever all ties. Sophia? Do what you want with her. Raise her yourself or give her to an orphanage, whatever is more convenient for you. You also have the right to refuse her and start a new life, without obligations. This child was a big mistake, an accident. And our marriage apparently too. It seemed to me then, when we met by chance in the bar. It just seemed that something was possible between us, that it was fate. It didn't work out. I was mistaken. We are completely different, not suited for each other. We have different goals, but I still wish you personal happiness. Be happy, just as I have found my happiness. That was all. The letter ended there, leaving behind only emptiness and pain. Arthur couldn't believe that Chloe was really like that. A true monster, cold and calculating, capable of abandoning her own child. Give Sophia to an orphanage? He, Arthur, now had no one closer in the world than his daughter. Before, it seemed that Chloe was also there, that she would come to her senses, recover, become sweet and caring, loyal and understanding. After all, financial difficulties are common, temporary difficulties. And they weren't even that poor. They had everything they needed and more, just not the former luxury. Arthur, with difficulty, but still, admitted the bitter truth. Chloe was with him only because of his money, because of the standard of living he could give her. She was in distress then, after the divorce from Daniel, and was looking for someone who could pull her out of poverty, support her, take on all her financial issues, become a new sponsor. And such a person was found in him. Chloe was happy for a while, enjoying comfort. She literally twisted Arthur, who was in love with her, around her little finger, manipulated him. And when her husband lost his high-paying job and there was less money in the family, she started looking for another, more profitable option. And the child was not an obstacle for her in this, only an annoying hindrance. Chloe indeed never showed up again, never tried to get in touch. She lived in Germany. Arthur saw her photos on her social media page, where she looked happy and carefree. He even tried to contact her, to write, but immediately ended up on her blacklist. Chloe was not interested in her daughter at all. Arthur couldn't understand this at all, how someone could be so indifferent to their own child. It seemed to him that after some time, her heart would still ache for the little one. Maternal instinct would awaken. But no, this did not happen. She completely erased them from her life. Arthur submitted to fate exactly until it presented another sharp turn, a terrible blow. Just a year later, Sophia was suddenly diagnosed with a rare blood disease. Genetics debuted, as the professor explained. It would have happened sooner or later anyway. It was inherent in her. Sophia was only 4 years old then. She was just a tiny thing. Endless examinations began, uninterrupted treatments, trips to hospitals. At first, Arthur thought he needed to sort out all the problems before school, find the right therapy, stabilize his daughter's condition. He thought that medicine was so advanced now that they simply couldn't fail to help his girl. They would find a solution. Yes, she would have to be on pills all her life, constantly monitored. Not pleasant, of course, but what could he do? Many people live with chronic diseases like that. But Sophia's illness was very rare and insidious. It progressed. It literally ruined the girl's blood, sapped her strength. The little one always felt tired, weak. She was constantly nauseous, feeling sick. The nanny who took care of Sophia almost around the clock worried about the girl as if she were her own, and even cried, seeing her suffering. Looking at this kind woman, Arthur involuntarily thought of Chloe. She didn't even know what trouble her daughter was in, that she was fighting for her life. And if she knew, would she help in any way? The man again, after so many years, tried to reach his ex-wife, to tell her about Sophia's illness, but she didn't want to know about him, ignored all his attempts. Hans had already married her. They even raised a small son. Sophia's half-brother. And judging by the photos Arthur sometimes saw on social media, Chloe was a very tender and loving mother to this child. She hugged him, played with him. This gave Arthur a faint hope. Perhaps now Chloe understood how important a mother is to a little one, how strong that bond is. Perhaps the news of her daughter's illness would not leave her indifferent. Some sympathy would awaken. Maybe she would help Sophia in some way, find some German professor, that very specialist, who would prescribe a new treatment, and Sophia would recover, get a chance. But Chloe categorically refused to communicate with her ex-husband, and she didn't want to know anything about her daughter either. She had completely abandoned her. True, Arthur did manage to tell her what had happened to Sophia, to convey the information. He had to act through one of Chloe's friends, with whom Arthur maintained rare contact. She asked me to tell you to forget about her existence, as if she doesn't exist at all, as if she died for you. That friend, Chloe's former classmate, later told Arthur. She said it just like that, without embellishment. After that conversation, after those cruel words, Arthur understood that he would still have to rely only on himself, on his own strength. There was no more hope for Chloe, none, not even the faintest. No, she had finally and irrevocably erased her ex-husband and even her daughter from her life, closed that page. And Arthur continued the fight for his beloved Sophia's health independently, alone. He had no one closer or dearer in the world. Sophia grew up to be absolutely her daddy's girl, and looked at her father with eyes so full of love and admiration, as if she saw before her an omnipotent demigod capable of anything. Arthur couldn't let her down. Sophia grew up to be a kind, smiling girl, despite her illness, despite the constant weakness. She tried to enjoy life, to notice the beauty around her. Arthur never ceased to be amazed at how simple, seemingly ordinary things delighted his child, made her eyes shine. A butterfly resting on a bright autumn leaf, the dance of snowflakes in the air, a cat sneaking up on a flock of pigeons. "Daddy, look how beautiful." The little one pointed with her tiny finger at things that had previously evoked no special feelings or emotions in Arthur, seemed mundane. And the man understood that yes, his daughter was right. These were indeed amazing scenes worth stopping and admiring. Arthur tried to spend every free minute with his daughter, to give her his time and attention. He liked listening to her thoughts about the world, her fantasies, and making plans for the future with her, even the most unrealistic ones. Sophia dreamed of becoming an artist and traveling the world with her exhibitions, showing her paintings to people. Looking at his daughter's drawings, Arthur understood. This was quite possible. The little one clearly had talent, a gift. He even enrolled her in an art club for preschoolers to develop her abilities. But the girl couldn't go there for the same reason she didn't go to kindergarten. The illness sapped her strength, made the little one susceptible to infections. Any contact with other children was a risk. But Arthur found a way out. He started inviting an art teacher directly to their home. A middle-aged woman, kind and patient of course, immediately fell in love with Sophia, with this bright girl. Well, of course. This radiant little one exuded tenderness and kindness, attracted people to her. Only, she wasn't getting better, quite the opposite. Over the years, the illness progressed, became more aggressive. The illness is rare, little studied, genetic. Genetics are always complicated. Well, the girl drew such an unlucky ticket at birth, such is her fate. Arthur heard from the doctors, and these words sounded like a sentence. All the doctors said roughly the same thing. Only a few people in the world, true luminaries, are studying this ailment. The queues to these specialists are miles long. It's almost impossible to get to them. The treatment is expensive because each case is individual and requires entire scientific studies to understand anything, to find therapy. But some patients manage to achieve stable remission, giving them a chance for a normal life, while nothing helps others, alas. Arthur knew all the professors studying the disease that was slowly but surely killing his daughter. There were indeed few of them, countable on one's fingers. In Russia, only two, Professor Peterson and Dr. Williams. Both lived and worked in Moscow, in the best clinics. And it was impossible to get an appointment with either of them, to break through the bureaucracy and queues. First, huge queues of equally desperate parents. Second, even just a consultation with these medical luminaries cost so much that Arthur would have had to take out a loan at this stage, borrow money. And both doctors' schedules were booked a year in advance, and Sophia didn't have that kind of time. Arthur was constantly told to call back in a couple of months, in case someone canceled. He called almost every week, but always heard the same answer. No appointments, everything is booked. Call back in a month or two, maybe something will open up. But there was almost no hope left of getting an appointment. Time was running out. Arthur also tried to contact foreign professors working with Sophia's illness, looked for clinics in Europe. Only there, everything was even more complicated, more expensive, and even more inaccessible. Arthur felt devastated and helpless, standing still when he needed to run. He looked at his daughter, at her fading gaze. Sophia was wasting away day by day, becoming weaker, paler. Dark shadows lay under her large turquoise eyes, like her mother's, a sign of the illness. Watching this was unbearable. His heart was breaking. Arthur managed to get a transfer to the Moscow Research Institute of Hematology to undergo at least a supportive course of treatment. This didn't solve the problem completely, didn't cure her, but it gave the girl time, precious time. Arthur literally gnawed out this time from the illness, from fate, with his teeth. He knew, even medical luminaries who had dedicated their lives to fighting such diseases might not be able to help, might not find the key. Arthur was perfectly aware of this, understood the risks. But he had to at least try, use every chance. After all, there were patients who recovered, who were helped. There were chances, and not small ones. He just had to use them. If only he could get to these professors, if only he could reach them, their offices. At work, Arthur took unpaid leave, took all possible days off. He would go to Moscow with his daughter himself. He wouldn't put this responsibility on the nanny. She was great as it was, helping a lot. And it was time to spend time with his own child, to make up for lost time. Otherwise, it was all work, work, and life was passing by. If Sophia gets better, we'll go to the zoo, to Red Square, see Moscow. It will be a great vacation. We'll rest together, he dreamed, trying to find something positive. Sophia was admitted to the day hospital. That was all he managed to get. Every day in the morning, Arthur took his daughter to the clinic. She underwent the necessary procedures, after which the father took the little one back to the hotel, where they had a comfortable room with a huge TV and a luxurious view of the Moscow River. Arthur hoped that after rehabilitation, his girl would feel better, that her strength would return. This had happened before, more than once. She would feel better for a while after the hospital. Sophia would feel sick. They would take her to the hospital. Injections, medications, IVs, blood transfusions, some other complex and probably painful medical manipulations. And Sophia would revive for a while, even start gaining weight. Her cheeks would turn pink. Liveliness would appear in her movements. That's what Arthur was counting on, a temporary improvement. And this time, it didn't work out. Sophia remained just as weak. The procedures didn't have the same effect. She even stopped drawing because it was hard to hold pencils and brushes. She had no strength. Sophia lay in bed all day, staring at the ceiling. What zoo? What Red Square? Arthur asked the doctors questions. They shrugged and explained that the illness was taking its toll, that this is what happens to such children sooner or later. It's a natural process. Supportive therapy is not a radical measure. It only slows down the process. And this is beyond the competence of general practitioners. They can only act according to instructions, according to the protocol. In Sophia's case, experiments, an individual approach, targeted help from the best specialists were needed. Everything boiled down to the fact that the girl needed to see Dr. Williams or Professor Peterson, those very professors, as soon as possible. Arthur tried to get his daughter admitted to the hospital for round-the-clock medical supervision so that she would be constantly monitored. Her condition was worsening, and he was afraid to be alone with her. The unfortunate father was afraid that one night, or perhaps during the day, something terrible would happen, a critical seizure, and he would be all alone and unable to help his girl in any way, wouldn't have time to call for help. "No beds," the doctors at the hospital replied. "And your girl doesn't have urgent indications. This is her condition. It's stable for now and expected for this stage. She doesn't need emergency help now, only specialized care." Arthur understood. Sophia was fading, slowly but surely. If he didn't arrange a meeting with one of the professors now, while they were in Moscow, if he took his daughter home to their city after rehabilitation, nothing would help Sophia anymore. It would be too late. The mere thought of this made him feel hot. His heart ached with horror. And Arthur decided, no, he wouldn't leave, he wouldn't give up. He would waylay these doctors, wait for them after work, break right into the operating room or office, and force one of them to admit Sophia, to examine her. Even if he had to serve time for his actions later, be punished, he would achieve his goal, get this chance for his daughter. The desperate father was ready for anything, for any extreme measures. And now Arthur was sitting on the bench in the park for this very reason, waiting, watching. Across the road was the hospital where Professor Peterson worked. Dr. Williams had suddenly gone to some international conference, leaving all the burden on his colleague. Only Peterson remained, whose workload, for obvious reasons, had increased many times after his colleague's departure. Arthur knew what this doctor looked like. He had seen his photos online. A middle-aged man, slightly older than himself, dark hair, attentive brown eyes, clearly defined cheekbones, a straight nose, a strong jaw. Arthur had been staking out Peterson near the clinic for days, waiting. He would wait until Sophia fell asleep in the hotel room, and then go to his post in the park. It was just a pity Arthur couldn't be absent for long. He couldn't leave Sophia completely alone for a long time. But while the little one was sleeping, he could stand guard, try his luck. He hadn't managed to catch Peterson. He either left through another exit or drove away in a car directly from the inner courtyard. The plan was obviously not very successful, too passive. He needed to get into the hospital, find the doctor, force him to see Sophia. First beg, tell him about the trouble, then, if that didn't work, maybe threaten, pressure. The desperate father was ready for anything, even the most terrible deeds. Anxious thoughts swirled in his head, each one darker than the last. In recent days, anger and hatred towards injustice had lived in Arthur's soul, as well as envy of the parents of healthy children who didn't understand their happiness, didn't appreciate it. Arthur himself didn't like these feelings. He had always considered himself a generally good person. That's how his beloved grandmother had raised him. But he was ready for terrible things, even crimes, if it would save Sophia. Anything, just to pull her out of the clutches of the illness. If necessary, he would seize one of Peterson's relatives, and then he would have to admit Sophia, help her. Of course, the consequences for him, Arthur, would be terrible. He understood that. But oh well, at least Sophia would stay alive, get a chance, if he was lucky. "Why are you so sad?" A clear, ringing voice distracted Arthur from his gloomy thoughts. The man started and turned around. A thin boy, about 7 years old, was sitting next to him on the bench. The child was slightly older than Sophia. He had large blue eyes, a turned-up, freckled nose, and a very curious gaze. The boy clearly needed a haircut. His long, light brown hair stuck out in all directions. His clothes. It was clear that his parents were caring but very poor. Old, worn clothes, obviously handed down from someone. The style was too outdated, worn out, dusty sneakers. But the sweater was neatly darned, with love. "Why are you so sad?" the boy asked again, not embarrassed. "Me? No, I'm not sad, just thinking about my own things, Arthur replied. No, I can see it, the boy insisted confidently. Don't worry, everything will be fine. It often happens like this. First it's bad, and then everything gets better. Sooner or later it definitely will. You're probably right, Arthur smiled, looking at him. It was impossible not to smile, looking into those pure blue eyes, full of light. This boy was somehow sincere, bright, real. He radiated a special warm energy, an amazing child. Why are you walking alone here? Where are your parents? Arthur looked around, feeling worried. After all, the boy was too young for independent walks in the park, and he wasn't acting very cautiously. He sat down next to him, an adult stranger, started a conversation without any fear. Who knows who he might encounter? Alone. Grandmother is sick today, in bed. And I came here to a friend, we agreed. He waits for me every day. I help him, and he helps me. It sounds like you and he are real friends. Arthur smiled, feeling warmth from these words. Keep in touch. Such friendship is a great rarity nowadays. You need to cherish it. I know, the boy smiled, and his smile was funny and touching at the same time because he was missing 2 front teeth. He was a wonderful boy after all, and he talked so well, easily, naturally, as if he had known him for 100 years. The only thing that bothered him was that such a little one was walking alone in the city. Grandmother is sick, and your parents are working, I guess. That's why you're here alone? Does grandmother know where her grandson is, or did you leave without asking? She knows, yes. I told her where I was going, the little one assured him. Don't worry, I'm big now. I understand everything. I know how to cross the road, and I'm wary of bad people. I know how to behave. Arthur, I'm a stranger to you, a complete stranger. And you talk to me so trustingly, Arthur said. You're a good person, the boy stated with childish spontaneity, looking directly into Arthur's eyes. You can see it right away in your eyes. Tears welled up in Arthur's eyes for some reason, stinging. A trusting, sweet child. He calls him good, not knowing what heavy thoughts are in his head right now, what he is ready to do for his daughter. Arthur was even ready to commit a crime for Sophia. And this boy thinks he's good, sees only the light in him. Anyone could deceive him, a defenseless, trusting little one. Still, it's better not to talk to strangers, Sam. People, come in all kinds. Not everyone is kind. Parents told me. They didn't tell me. The boy shook his head, and sadness sounded in his voice. I don't know them. I don't remember my parents at all. Grandmother is raising me, and my parents died when I was very little. They got into an accident, that's all. I was in the car too, but I survived and wasn't even hurt. Not a scratch. Grandmother said angels saved me because I still have to grow up and make this world better, that I have a purpose. What a story you have, Arthur said, amazed by his account. He looked at the boy now with completely different eyes, with even greater sympathy. Yes, the guy probably doesn't have an easy life. He knew grief early. But he's so open, kind, sociable, he hasn't withdrawn into himself. He's going to save the world. He believes in his mission. My name is Sam, by the way. The young interlocutor finally introduced himself, extending a small hand for a handshake. And yours is Arthur. Uncle Arthur, Arthur replied, shaking his hand. A woman in a green coat, a vendor of fresh pastries, rolled a portable cart past the bench, spreading the aroma of baked goods. Buns, sweet buns, hot from the oven. Who wants buns? It didn't escape Arthur's notice how Sam followed this cart with his gaze, full of desire. And then it dawned on the man. The child was clearly from a very poor family. He must be hungry, not getting enough to eat. Sam, did you have breakfast today? Arthur asked. A friend treated me to a sandwich, but that was a long time ago this morning, the boy replied. He clearly wanted to eat but didn't dare to ask. He was shy. Arthur got up, went to the woman with the cart, and bought 2 fluffy, rosy buns with raisins from her. He handed one of them to Sam, who immediately sank his teeth into the treat like a hungry wolf cub, with incredible appetite. Watching the child devour the bun with such pleasure and appetite was a pure joy, especially after Arthur had spent the entire morning unsuccessfully trying to feed Sophia porridge. She hadn't eaten anything recently. The illness had taken away her appetite. "Is the second bun for you?" Sam asked, finishing his. "Why aren't you eating it? It's very tasty. It just melts in your mouth." "No, this is for my daughter," Arthur replied. He thought that perhaps Sophia would want to try at least a piece of the fragrant pastry, her favorite. He would be happy if she managed even a quarter of the bun. "You have a daughter. What's her name? How old is she?" Sam asked with interest. "Sophia. She just turned 6, Arthur replied. "Why didn't you bring her to the park with you? The weather is so nice, the sun is shining. We could have walked, run around together." "You see, Sam, Sophia is sick. She has a fever," Arthur said, without going into details. Naive little one. He probably doesn't know yet that there are illnesses in the world worse than a common cold or flu. "No, it's much more serious. If it were just a fever, it's related to blood, something hematological," Sam suddenly said, and Arthur flinched. He stared at the little one with wide eyes. How could he know such words? The phrase he had just spoken didn't fit the appearance of a freckled, toothless, tousle-haired first grader. "Wow, where did you get such knowledge?" Arthur was surprised. "My friend knows a lot about illnesses. He tells me sometimes," Sam explained. "He's very smart. You know, your daughter needs fresh air and good emotions to fight the illness." "I agree," Arthur sighed, amazed by his thoughtfulness. Sam surprised him more and more. He seemed wise beyond his years. "But Sophia is too weak. It's hard for her to walk, even just to sit on a bench. Then maybe I'll come to your place? Do you live far from here? I want to become a doctor when I grow up, to help people. I already know how to heal a little. It always helps grandmother when I put my hand on her forehead when she has a headache. She says she feels better right away." "And grandmother won't mind if you go visit strangers?" Arthur asked, still worried about his safety. "She won't," the little one assured him with full confidence. "She knows I can tell people apart and avoid bad ones from a mile away. I can feel them." On the one hand, this amazing boy was right. Sophia really needed positive emotions, new impressions, communication. Arthur no longer knew how to cheer up his daughter, how to distract her from the illness. She was indifferent to toys, watched cartoons without interest. The girl couldn't eat chocolates or other sweets now. She simply didn't want to. She felt nauseous. Sophia obviously lacked communication with other children. She was isolated. She had once dreamed of going to kindergarten, or at least playing with the neighborhood kids on the playground. She talked about it a lot. But it didn't work out. The girl couldn't integrate into a children's group at all. She was too weak and sickly. And here was Sam with such a tempting offer, with such a sincere desire to help. There was something strange about the fact that he was going to a hotel with a strange child, that he might even be punished for it if someone found out. Although, of course, he wasn't going to do anything bad to Sam. Quite the opposite. He only wanted to do good. Still, the man decided to take the risk, to take this step for his daughter. Sam. He was so radiant somehow, so open, so sensitive, so unusual. If this little boy could cheer up Sophia even a little, bring a smile to her face, then Arthur's risk would not be in vain. When Arthur and Sam entered the hotel room, Sophia was already awake. She was lying in bed, staring blankly at the ceiling, lost in her thoughts. Seeing the unfamiliar boy her father had brought, the girl brightened up a little. Her eyes lit up with interest. A spark appeared in them. "Who is that?" she asked, propping herself up on her elbows in bed, curiously examining the guest. "I'm Sam," The guest stepped forward, smiling. Your dad and I became friends in the park. I came to visit you, to check on you. And I'm Sophia, the girl replied, smiling back. I know, Uncle Arthur told me. I know you're sick, but it's not scary. Yes, the girl nodded sadly, remembering her illness. Well, don't worry. Doctors are good now. They cure everything. They'll definitely help. You know, when I grow up, I want to become a doctor too, to help people. And I want to be an artist. Do you draw well? Sophia replied proudly, brightening up. Arthur was pleased to hear that tone in her voice, to see how she joined the conversation. Before, his girl had been indifferent to everything, and suddenly she was so lively in conversation with an unfamiliar boy. Dad, get my folder with drawings, she asked, addressing her father. Sam climbed onto the blanket with Sophia, making himself comfortable. She sat up and began showing him her masterpieces, her drawings. Sam looked at the pictures with interest, asked questions, and Sophia enthusiastically told him something about their subjects, about what she wanted to depict. They clearly enjoyed each other's company and found a common language. Arthur smiled, looking at his animated daughter, and quietly went into the room so as not to disturb them. Maybe, seeing Sam, Sophia will eat well today too, he thought hopefully. From the room, cheerful children's laughter occasionally echoed. It was amazing because Sophia had rarely smiled lately. Her laughter was completely forgotten. Amazing and wonderful at the same time to hear that sound within the walls of the hotel room. Then Arthur walked Sam home. He lived nearby the hotel, an old 5-story building right behind the park. Sophia was asleep by the time the guests left, tired after the procedures and games. The illness still took a lot of energy, despite the joy of the meeting. Sophia is very sick, Sam said sadly on the way home, his face serious. I'll ask my friend how to cure her. He'll help. He definitely knows. He's so smart and kind, you know. Arthur just smiled, listening to him. Naive little one, he'd probably think some boy slightly older than himself, who has read smart books or watched a medical show, is a genius. It was funny, but also sad, realizing his naivety. It's a pity Sam is mistaken, Arthur thought. Arthur wished the child's words were true, that this friend really had the answer. Can I come to your place tomorrow too, Uncle Arthur? Sam asked hopefully. Come, of course, Arthur smiled. At the same time, not earlier, Sophia will be at the hospital for procedures. Okay, I'll definitely come, Sam promised. You'll help me a lot if you stay with her while I go run some errands. Keep an eye on her. Arthur suddenly realized that while Sam was with them, he would have a chance to go to Professor Peterson's house, try his luck there. Maybe he could finally catch him, talk to him, convince him, tell him about Sophia. I'll definitely stay with Sophia, look after her. She's such a good girl, kind, not like that stuck-up Jenny from the yard who bullies everyone. Sophia really draws beautifully. She has talent. The next day, Sam kept his promise. He knocked on the hotel room door exactly at the appointed time, to the minute. Sophia was already waiting for him. She had prepared a board game that she thought her new friend would like. Arthur met Sam, and leaving the children to play, went to the other end of the city, to Professor Peterson's house. The area was prestigious. The houses looked expensive. Arthur took a waiting position, hiding behind the trees. He couldn't wait long. Time was limited. He couldn't keep Sam until late at night. His grandmother must be worried already. Sophia was asleep again when Arthur returned, tired after the procedures and games. The man noted that she had become even paler than usual. Her condition was worsening. She's gotten worse. Sam looked up at Arthur, his eyes full of despair and anxiety. Can I come to your place tomorrow with my friend? He'll definitely help her. He's the smartest and kindest person in the world. He knows how to heal. Of course, of course. Come with your friend, Arthur allowed, upset by his daughter's condition and another failure. The more the merrier. Sophia will be happy to see your friend. She needs company. You too, Sam promised with a mysterious smile. You'll be happy to see him too. You'll see. Sophia got worse during the night. Her temperature rose, she started shivering, she was trembling. Arthur managed to stop the seizure by calling an ambulance, but the doctors said that the supportive measures, just a little more, and neither pills, nor medicine, nor IVs, would be able to handle these seizures. Sophia was already asleep after the seizure, and he still held her thin hand, stroked her slender fingers, and thought about where and how to find Peterson, how to get to him. He could go directly to the hospital, threaten, persuade, make a scene. But there were so many people around, medical staff, security. They would quickly escort him out, even call the police, and then nothing would work out. No, he had to waylay the doctor somewhere else, where there were fewer witnesses. The next day began as usual, with anxiety and routine. Arthur woke his daughter, tried to make her eat porridge with fruit, persuade her to eat. Sophia managed a couple of spoons, refused the rest. She had no strength or appetite. Arthur called a taxi, carried his daughter outside in his arms, wrapping her up. They went to the clinic. Sophia was taken to the elevator on a gurney. Procedures and examinations awaited her. Arthur, meanwhile, sat in the lobby for several hours, scrolling through the newsfeed on his phone, looking out the window at passers-by, talking with the mothers of other day patients like his daughter. Most of them were mothers here, attentive, caring, loving, completely absorbed in their children. Arthur thought he didn't measure up to their level. After all, women are better with small children. It's in their nature. It was a pity his girl was deprived of maternal warmth, the most important thing in a baby's life. Later, despite being tired after the procedures, Sophia kept asking her father, would Sam come soon? The boy was late, time was passing. Arthur had already decided that his new friend wouldn't visit them today. Maybe grandmother didn't let him, forbade him? Maybe he got caught up playing with someone and forgot? He was so sociable. He probably had tons of friends everywhere. But the long-awaited knock on the door finally sounded, interrupting his thoughts. He wondered if Sam was alone, or if he had come with his friend after all, as he had intended. At the door, Sam was smiling broadly, his face radiant with joy, and behind him, an adult man shifted from foot to foot, clearly embarrassed. And not just any man. Black eyes, a strong jaw, chiseled cheekbones. Arthur had seen these features in photographs. It was Professor Peterson himself. Arthur could barely stand from the rush of emotions, from shock and disbelief. What was happening? How was this possible? How could this little boy bring him a medical luminary? "Hi, Uncle Arthur," Sam said, beaming. "Meet him. This is my friend Uncle Andrew. Remember you said I could come with him? He'll help Sophia, I told you." A year and a half had passed since that amazing day, changing everything. Arthur was in Moscow again, and again in the same park, near the same bench where he had first met Sam. Only now it was spring outside, mid-April. Everything was coming alive. The newly sprouted juicy green on the trees and grass, the clear blue sky, the bright warm sun warming after a long winter. Arthur sat on the bench, looking tenderly at Sam and Sophia. The children had drawn hopscotch on the asphalt and were jumping and laughing selflessly. Both had grown a lot during this time, matured and strengthened. Sam was almost a teenager now. He was about 9 years old. The same open gaze, the same charming, though no longer gap-toothed smile. All his teeth were in place. But he had become taller, stronger, more robust. Teenage awkwardness had appeared in him. It was good that the boy hadn't lost his spontaneity and openness to the world. He would probably remain like this forever, kind, attentive, sensitive to others' troubles. Sophia was 7 now. She had started school. Arthur hadn't hoped just a year and a half ago that his girl would go to a regular school on time, sit at a desk with her peers. At best, homeschooling awaited her. At worst, It was hard for Arthur to think about that even now, when everything was behind them. It was too painful. "You beat me again!" Sam's voice held genuine admiration, although Arthur knew the truth. Sophia smiled proudly, beaming with the joy of victory. Arthur chuckled, looking at them. He saw everything, understood everything. Sam always let Sophia win, made her feel strong and agile, made her believe in herself. The boy knew she still needed positive emotions and faith in her strength after the illness. So he tried. He took care of her. He generally behaved as if he was not a year older than Sophia, but at least 10 years older, showing wisdom and patience. A little sage with a big heart. On that memorable day, Arthur couldn't believe for a long time, couldn't grasp, that Sam's friend turned out to be Professor Peterson himself, the very one he had so desperately tried to reach. Yes, the boy had mentioned more than once that his friend understood medicine, but he hadn't said that he was one of the 2 most famous professors in the country, a luminary of science. Peterson turned out to be a wonderful person, not only a brilliant doctor, but also a kind, compassionate person. Arthur told him about his trouble, about Sophia's illness, about his futile attempts to get an appointment. While the men talked, the children started playing again in the bedroom, the same board game Sophia had prepared for Sam. Peterson was horrified by how difficult it was for people to get an appointment with him, what barriers stood in their way. It turned out he wasn't aware of the situation, didn't know about the mile-long queues and inaccessibility. The man decided right away, without delay, to create his own website so that patients could contact him directly at the clinic, without intermediaries and unnecessary bureaucracy. After the examination, thorough, lengthy, maximally detailed, with the involvement of other specialists, the professor developed the necessary treatment plan for Sophia. It was quite expensive, required rare medications, but Peterson personally secured state subsidies for the girl, obtained funding, and the little one immediately began to recover. Her condition started to improve. Unfortunately, they couldn't completely get rid of the illness. Sophia would have to take medication all her life, maintain her condition. But she was no different from ordinary healthy children. She became just as quick, noisy, energetic, even started getting into mischief, which particularly pleased Arthur. It meant his daughter had enough strength to engage in childish pranks, to live a full life. And this was happiness, immense happiness, which not everyone would understand, but nevertheless. Sophia went to school at the appointed time, to the 1st grade, or rather to 2 schools at once, a regular comprehensive school and an art school, to develop her talent. Every year she had to travel to Moscow for rehabilitation and examination, to monitor her health condition. Well, both the daughter and the father were happy about this circumstance. After all, Sam lived in Moscow, the amazing boy who played a key role in Sophia's fate, who became her guardian angel. He also eagerly awaited the arrival of both Uncle Arthur and his now best friend. How did Sam know Peterson? How could a famous professor and a boy from a poor family become friends? Sam met Andrew at the hospital, where the boy's grandmother was once admitted with a heart attack. The little one was very worried about his only relative. He cried. He couldn't calm down at all. Peterson was the one who managed to help Sam in that difficult moment. He talked to him, calmed him down, gave him water. They talked for a long time while the doctors examined grandmother. All this time the boy's grandmother both laughed and cried, watching their interaction. When the danger passed, Peterson informed Sam of the good news about his grandmother's condition. By that time, the boy and the man had incredibly become friends, found a common language. Sam had managed to tell his new acquaintance that he intended to become a doctor, just like him. So they had even more interesting topics for conversation, shared interests. Peterson was touched by the fate of the radiant boy, his openness and kindness. He didn't want him to end up in an orphanage during his grandmother's illness, and so he took him home, offered him to live with him. Peterson's wife gladly accepted the guest. They had a son of the same age, and the boys, of course, got along well, became friends. So from then on, Sam would visit his friend, Uncle Andrew, at the hospital, after school, or on weekends. And he, despite being busy, never refused the boy company and generally participated in his fate in every way, as he understood. It was difficult for the elderly woman to cope with her grandson alone. He needed male support. When Sam, tears smearing his cheeks, told Peterson about Sophia, about her serious illness, he simply couldn't remain indifferent, couldn't pass by someone else's trouble. Moreover, judging by everything, it was about a disease that the professor was specifically studying. His scientific interest coincided with the opportunity to help. Arthur and Peterson were now also on friendly terms. They were connected by their shared concern for the children. Andrew personally ensured that his signature was always on the reports about Sophia's condition. He controlled the treatment process. Most often, of course, their conversations were about Sam, about his successes and plans. The boy's fate was now important to both of them. They saw great potential in him. "Sam is a wonderful kid," Arthur told Peterson. "I wish I had a son like that, so kind and smart." "Bright and, most importantly, sensitive," Peterson agreed. "The most necessary combination for a future doctor, for a true healer. He will become a doctor who saves more than one life, I'm sure."